in St Andrew's Church here, and the jingle. It's great to have you, and we hope and pray that our live stream will continue to work since you've had some issues with it recently. So very good. So what have we just read today?
So it's the last passage that we have from Micah.
Right.
Remember you said it's quite a short
Short.
book. Yeah. So not the shortest, but one of the shorter ones. So yeah, today is the last bit.
Right. And what did anything? There was some positive bits here, weren't there?
I thought it felt like a psalm, really. So
A psalm. That's
yeah,
interesting.
it was very.
Right, I'm getting all confused with the bits where he was, because the psalm was also very good today, actually.
Yeah, and it was a bit different, so it's
Yeah.
like a historical account of everything that happened during the Exodus, in the book of Exodus.
But it's also, isn't it about his promises as well?
Yeah, this Micah.
Because he's had some quite grim prophecies
Yeah.
in the beginning, and he says, when I sit in the darkness, the Lord will be a light to me.
Yeah.
And he says, I must bear indignation because I've sinned. But until he takes my side and executes judgment for me, which is interesting, which is kind of like Christ, isn't it? Because he takes our side and dies for our sins.
Yeah, I also thought that when he mentions the shepherd, so he addresses God saying, shepherd your people with your staff, the flock that belongs to you. It's also, it makes you think of Christ, because Jesus said that I'm the shepherd. So again, this is not the first time that Micah's words seem to refer us to the coming of Christ.
And then also it says, as you came out of the land of Egypt, show us these marvelous things about the sort of wonderfulness of the world around.
And it speaks about God's mercy. So they say that God pardons everyone. And in the end, and he says everything will be fine.
Exactly. It says here, who is a God like you, O fear? I can't got fear on my laptop. The name of his focus on hope. You got it there.
I'll try to.
Because I can't. My Mac isn't connected. We don't have Wi-Fi. It's hope and mercy, right? It's help from God, helping the nations out of the sinful lives and punishment from God.
Yeah.
Exactly. So because we had Jesus predicted in the beginning of chapter 5.
About Bethlehem.
About him being born.
Yeah.
Great. Shall we move on to Mark?
Yeah.
This is interesting. This is the defiled hands. It's really interesting about not washing your hands before you eat.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, it was a practical thing originally in the law, wasn't it? Because a lot of the laws were quite sensible. It was just like, just washing your hands. I mean, that we all know washing your hands is kind of a smart thing. Important thing to do to stop the spread of germs. So it's like, wash your hands. But it's interesting because actually, if you go into a mosque, into a synagogue, I think they have places for washing their hands. I went to the Abrahamic family house in Abu Dhabi, which has those 3 places of worship: a church, a synagogue, and a mosque. And each one of them, they connect all 3 of them with water, which is quite interesting the way they do it. So there's a fountain, like a font for baptism. In the Christian church, in the Jewish synagogue, they have these places for washing your hands as you go into the church at the back. And I was listening to a guide who was saying it was part of the sort of tradition of the rite of preparing yourself was to wash your hands. And likewise in the mosque there's also a sort of water feature for cleaning. So it was quite interesting. So that kind of reflects this need to clean.
Yeah. But at the same time, what Jesus does is he criticizes Pharisees for taking this too far. So that's they want people to obey these traditions, and then
yes, because basically they've ceased to see the meaning behind, and it's become something. They're sort of obsessed by the letter of the law rather than the spirit of the law.
And also the second paragraph here about parents and children. So apparently, what Jesus says is that here korban is something that is an offering to God, and then Pharisees and people Jesus criticized, they used this korban, this offering to God, as an excuse from not fulfilling their earthly responsibilities that they have before their neighbors, before their
well, korban is that the tradition of giving your property to the church?
Yeah.
Right. Whatever use had for me from a korban, that is offering to God.
So they said that if you don't do korban, but if you take care of your parents, that's bad. So you should do korban, and that's apparently so many of them thought that they were justified in not supporting their parents, or if they fulfilled this korban.
Right. Which exactly, that's God saying you're failing to honour your mother and your father.
And again, this is obviously important, very important to remember God in everything you do, but it shouldn't be an excuse to be a bad person in the earthly way.
Because he says exactly, it's your ways. You're taking your ways over my ways, right? You're celebrating basically your traditions rather than really upholding the word of God, which is interesting.
It actually also made me think of some article I read about from an Orthodox church. So there was an Orthodox priest who was very sad to hear an opinion poll. So they were just asking the congregation, women. So there is a tradition that women should cover their heads when they enter an Orthodox church, and so they just had a poll to find out what women would do if they forgot their headscarf.
Right.
So would they still go into the church, or would they just walk past and go home? And most said, of course you can't go into the church, so this is bad. And this priest was very sad, because obviously it's more important to go into the church, especially if you feel you're needed, if you feel you need to go there and pray. And
that's interesting.
But most people said, of course you can't go if you don't have the scarf, this is very bad. And the priest was very sad, and he tried to explain that.
That's it. It's a very interesting survey. But actually, a lot of Orthodox churches I've been to where they offer you headscarves.
Yeah.
Actually, you can go in and they just have some headscarves, neatly clean and sort of and washed and wrapped, so you can just pop around your head. But yeah, and the washing the hands thing, actually, Fiera made the point, of course, we all do wash our hands very much, but there's the great story of washing your hands in medicine. Go and check it out, because the doctor that first discovered it is in Vienna in about 18 something or other, and that story is a remarkable story. I've forgotten his name. There's actually a play in London about this, and he was a doctor working in a maternity hospital, 2 maternity hospitals. One was run by nuns. They were like across the road from each other. One was run by nuns, and the mortality rate was something like 10 times less than the maternity on the other side, which was run by doctors. And it was such a high mortality rate that women didn't want to go to the other. It was well known that everyone that went to that hospital, a lot of them died, whereas if they went to the nuns, they didn't. And to the extent that actually women who were told to go, because they were selected on whichever day, so I think, on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays you went to the nuns, and the other days of the week you went to the doctors. So women would try literally to make sure they weren't giving birth on the wrong day. And he also noticed that actually women who actually gave birth in the street, because some actually preferred to give birth in the street rather on the way, rather than actually go into the doctors. And he discovered the mortality rate of people just giving birth in the street wasn't any worse. And he discovered that, in fact, the nuns, he couldn't understand what it was, but he discovered that the nuns washed hands, whereas the doctors didn't. And not only that, the doctors would come from doing other doctor operations, particularly doing, what do you call it when you have cadaver? When you cut open dead bodies. I forgot the name in English. Silly. But you know what I mean. They would do medical research. They'd cut open the body of dead. Post-mortem. Thank you. Well done. They'd do post-mortems, and they wouldn't wash their hands, and they'd then go with bits of, whatever, dead people on them, and then go and deliver babies. And that was what was killing And he didn't. No one understood this idea of germs. He just thought. He said there was a death thing on their hands. And of course, and the amazing thing is, the doctors were insulted. They went, "How dare you say we're gentlemen? We don't have death things on our hands. We're clean people. So how can you preposterous?" And as a result, he was ostracized and thrown out of the medical profession for being so daring as to suggest that a gentleman doctor's hands may be not good enough to deliver a baby. And yet the evidence showed that in fact the nuns who were washing their hands, and he identified, he didn't understand why, he just thought, well, obviously they're washing their hands, the doctors have this death thing on their hands, so obviously you just need to get the death, and they didn't understand because germs hadn't been discovered. But it's a really interesting story, where the science, they don't understand the science, all they understand is the observation of the nuns cleaning their hands and the doctors with post-mortem death. And of course, it is an amazing story, and he suffered dreadfully. He was thrown out of the medical profession because all the doctors said, "How dare you insult us?" You know.
And again, they were doing something that Jesus criticized the Pharisees for. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah. They were sort of being all full of their own self-importance, self-righteousness. It's very, very similar to the story you read today.
Keeping their traditions.
Exactly.
And not behind them.
It's amazing. Do check it out. If you Google the guy who discovered washing hands, lives in Vienna, it pops up pretty much straight away on Google. I've forgotten his name, but it's a great story. Anyway, okay, enough. We've talked for 11 minutes. Right.
To make up for it.
Okay, make up for yesterday. Yeah, okay. Okie dokes. Have a great Tuesday and see you all tomorrow. Bye. And